Hey, what's up, guys? So this is take two. I'm trying to, I've got a special guest tonight. His name is Nick Pineault, and he's joining me from Quebec, Montreal, up in Canada. And Nick is a health journalist. He's published more than 1,500 health publications, and he recently just had his book published, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. So give me just 1 minute. Let me try to get Nick on here before I had a Facebook malfunction. So just inviting Nick here. So bear with me for just a minute and we are going to get started. Okay, here we go. Take two. Let's see if this works. Hey, what's up, Scott? So we've got Scott Compton of the EMF Warriors here. Hello, Jackie. Hello, Shannon. Thanks for joining us. Just waiting to get Nick Pineault, EMF expert, on the call with me. And tonight we're going to be talking about different mitigation strategies you can do to protect yourself from EMFs. And there he is.
There he is. I'm trying to figure that stuff out. Turns out I moved my phone in the right position and it didn't detect it. So it was like, you cannot join this feed because you don't know technology. But now I'm good.
Go figure, huh? We're bashing technology and it's getting us back. So, hey, what's up, Brad? Got a few new people that joined the call. So welcome, Nick. Super psyched to have you here. We've been talking for a while over email. Nick gave me a pre-published copy of his book to check out, and I was super impressed by it. And I've been reading some of Nick's articles. Nick's got some really great articles. He's got I'm a little horsey tonight. I've got this cold, so just kind of bear with my voice. But Nick has some really great articles. As I mentioned before, Nick just published this book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. So we're going to be talking about this book tonight. We're going to be talking about different EMF mitigation strategies. And, I just gave a little demonstration before Nick came on the call. I have my my RF meter here, and I was just illustrating.
Same thing here.
Yeah, beautiful. So I was just illustrating how even when your printer is turned off, it's still transmitting RF radiation. So I unplugged it because, I did the demo and it failed, but take my word for it. When your printer's off and you put this next to it, about every 10, 15 seconds or so, you get spikes in the radiation. So you want to make sure that when you're not using your printer, you have to unplug it. Otherwise, it's another source of radiation, which causes inflammation, all sorts of negative things, which we're going to get into in a few minutes. Another thing that I wasn't aware of till recently is your laptop. So I have my laptop hardwired to my router, but on your laptop, you also have to put it in airplane mode. Otherwise, it's sending out signals looking for, Wi-Fi, looking for Bluetooth, looking for different things. So it's these little things you need to be aware of. And by doing these little things, you can further reduce your exposure to this wireless radiation. So, Nick, anything to add to that?
Well, an Xbox, we have an Xbox 360 is the same. There's a chip in there that just seems to be emitting 24/7. No matter, even if you turn it off, you have to unplug the thing, which is, to me, it's completely crazy just on an energy standpoint. Like, why are you wasting this electricity? I don't know, but it's just the way the technology is built. So it's just another source of these EMFs. And the way I put it in my book and on podcasts usually is just, it's a type of pollution in your home. It's electrosmog. I love the term electrosmog. I'm going to make it even the name of a program for practitioners that we're going to launch next year to educate them about the problem. But electrosmog is like you just don't see it. That's the difference between real black smoke that you're like, oh my God, I got to avoid this, and this kind of smog that you're creating without even knowing it, by adding all these different things to your environment. And printer is one of them. And even like your printer, even if it's plugged in with Ethernet, I would wonder if it's still emitting this freaking Wi-Fi, just because it's looking for a Wi-Fi network just in case. So it's just the way the technology is built, and you need to be aware that like unplugging stuff like that will make a difference. It will just reduce, just like you're filtering the air, filtering the water. It's like basic stuff, eating clean, trying to avoid pesticides. Like a lot of people are trying to avoid a lot of stuff that they know is not good for them. It's one of them that you got to add to the list, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, really good points there. I mean, I think the biggest challenge, Nick, for a lot of people is the whole fact that you can't see, smell, or taste this radiation that is so pervasive today. And, you know, if you go back 10, 15 years, all of a sudden cell phones started coming out. But it wasn't even until 10 years ago that the iPhone came out. So we've only had like decent smartphones for 10 years. Prior to that, people weren't on their phones that much. It was a pain in the ass to text because you had 3 letters on a number. Remember that? So people weren't texting that much. Some people were on the phone a lot making calls, but you didn't have nearly the number of people on these devices 10 years ago that you have today. And in addition to these wireless devices of your cell phone, which by the way, I just heard in the world, there are something like 3.6 billion cell phones. So if you go back 15 years ago, very few people had a cell phone. You know, it was like a big box. So there are 3.6 billion new sources of wireless radiation in our environment. And you have to ask yourself, you know, individually on itself, maybe it's not that bad. I don't know for sure. But when you add it all up in these big cities, and on top of that, when you put Bluetooth devices, and all of these different, you know, Nick and I just shared 3 examples of things in our environment: printers, computer, laptops, and gaming systems. And there are others too. A lot of these new appliances have the same thing too. So, Nick, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. When I heard, I'm not sure if it was your podcast or another, but a very important distinction to bring up is pulsed versus non-pulsed electromagnetic radiation. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure. The kind of signal that is now used in smartphones and has been, I've heard that it was a little bit less harmful with 3G compared to 4G, but I'm not too sure because I'm not an EMF engineer. All I know is that many studies have shown that the effects of EMFs are even worse when you have a fast pulsing and also the kind of modulation it uses. So there's 2 different things here. So pulsing is just ta, 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 ta. It's like a freaking military trying to shoot you down. And then the fact that the signal is not smooth, like in nature you have a smooth signal. When you have light coming in, this is one type of electromagnetic field, believe it or not. So it's smooth. When you have the Earth's magnetic field, the Schumann resonance that they call it, it's smooth. But then this is the cell phone signal. It's all over the place. It's jumping from very high power, very low, very high, very low. And it's even chopped in certain ways that they can insert more data in there. And I probably don't have the right industry terms because I'm not an EMF engineer, but these are characteristics of how the technology is built to perform better, to contain more signal, to contain, to be faster, for example, or to have different channels and whatnot. So all these different characteristics seems to make the signal even worse for our biology, maybe even more confusing to our body. And just to come back to the basics, well, how is it that EMFs affect us? I think the best way to put it is electricity. Our bodies function with electricity on all levels. For example, our brain emits brain waves. We can verify that when we plug people in to see their brain waves, and a lot of people that are into optimization look at that, or that have major diseases. Your heart has an electrical pulse. Your nervous system communicates throughout your body with electrical pulses. And then when you go deeper, the cells and even the mitochondria in the cell and even our gut microbiome is communicating with little sparks of electricity. And there's a ton of research just the last 10 years looking at the mechanism that are still unknown. And then you add in the environment electromagnetic fields. So it's part electric, part magnetic, that will disrupt information. So like even without looking at like super geeky stuff, just understanding the basics that we're playing with electricity over the air. It's there, you don't see it. If you can detect a Wi-Fi network, probably in my apartment building, maybe there's 20. I'm in Montreal, I'm in a large city. It's just the fact that if you can detect it, it means that your computer is picking up something. It means that to some extent, the information that is sent by a router, maybe at a 1 kilometer, if it's a super strong one, it is here somewhere in the room, and who knows what it's doing. And it is not only doing something, but then what is the cumulative effect of these signals that make your biology go, what the hell is going on? What are you trying to tell me? Is it we don't know the full mechanisms yet, so we can go into how it screws up calcium in the cell, and a lot of researchers are looking like, okay, what part of the cell is affected? But just overall, it seems that any part of your body can be affected. Just like when it comes to, I don't know, exposing yourself to UV radiation, you can burn any part of your body that is exposed, and you can also produce vitamin D. So there's a good side and a bad side. But people don't go in the sun 24/7. Whereas right now, I'm getting blasted thanks to this Facebook Live because I have to be on LTE. I'm getting blasted. Hopefully not 24/7, but most people are. Cell phone by the bedside, cell phone in their pocket, cell phone, they're texting next to their gut. And then when are you getting a relief from this exposure is the question. For most people, it's never. So it's really that. What I'm most afraid of is what is the effect long term, considering that a lot of studies are showing short-term effects that are very concerning. Then you compound that over 40 years, and I don't know what happens. I'm trying to prevent that best as I can, and you're doing it by spreading the information today, which I'm glad you're doing. But it's really that. It's short-term. Okay, are people getting sick right now? Which I think some people are, definitely. And what kind of acute effect are we seeing? Well, I tell people, put your phone on airplane mode at night, and they tell me, almost all of them, well, I slept better. Like, what is the effect of 10% better sleep over 4 years? That's my question. It's like, oh, wow, this is a huge factor that we can remove by just following simple steps. It's like, it's a button. But anyway, there's a whole rabbit hole about the politics side of it, where I'm like, okay, well, maybe Apple should tell us to put it on airplane mode, but no, it's not their fault. Yeah. Anyway, we can get into that if you want.
Well, Dick, that's a really good point. A lot of things, people need to come to terms with the fact that a lot of this comes down to personal responsibility. So it's your responsibility to educate yourself about these things, because the government is not going to. And I'll just bring up one little example of cigarettes. In cigarettes and EMFs, they're both dangerous, but they're very different. Technology is cool as shit, right? Most of us, technology allows, me in Ithaca, New York, and Nick up in Montreal to talk together and to broadcast to people all over the world. It's really awesome. Cigarettes are gross and disgusting. Most people intuitively know if you're in a room with somebody smoking, your eyes water, maybe you cough, you don't feel good. But cigarettes, we had research in the 1950s saying cigarettes are harmful. They cause cancer. And it wasn't until 1964 that the Surgeon General came out and said they, made cigarette manufacturers put a warning label on cigarettes. Now, when was meaningful legislation enacted to actually protect people from cigarette smoking. It didn't happen until like the 2000s, when you think about it, having like smoke-free campuses, restaurants, and even bars barring smoking. And in some parts of the US, I don't know what it's like in Canada, Nick, but there are still states in the South in the US that allow smoking in bars. So we've known smoking causes cancer for more than 50 years. It literally took almost 50 years for meaningful actions to be taken. How long is it going to take for something that's cool, that's useful, like technology? So this is your responsibility to educate yourself. So Nick is doing a great job getting the word out there. I'm trying to do the same. But at the end of the day, do your research. Don't take our word for it. Just reading through Nick's book, do you know how many references and how many citations you have in here to like publish research?
I think it's almost 600.
Almost 600.
Yeah.
So there is ample documentation of the harms of this out there. Spend some time and learn about this stuff, because I mean, Nick brought up so many great points when he was talking before, and the truth is, it's a giant biological experiment. We don't know the outcome yet, because people have never lived in these conditions before. We now have children being born into this environment, and we're seeing much higher level of disease in kids. And it's not just EMFs, there's different things, there's food, and we're not going to get into that right now, but I think it's fair to say, when you look at all the research, when you look at what exposure does to rats, which have an ability to withstand higher levels of radiation, it affects rats that can withstand radiation, right? So what's it doing to our children?
Well, there are some human studies as well. I mean, just on sperm, 201 studies that I identified in my book that are among 10 different meta-analyses. These studies where they take a bunch of studies and they look at the evidence and then only pick the best studies that are well-designed and independent, and then they say, okay, is there a conclusion? Well, 201 studies total all point towards the fact that EMS will disrupt sperm count and fertility in men. If this is not solid evidence, I don't know what it is. Like, in front of this evidence, when I wrote it, it's probably the strongest link that is the most blatant. It's almost ludicrous that we still let men have a cell phone in their pocket. Now, I cannot say, is it 5% disruption? Is it 10%? I don't know, but it's proven scientifically, so many studies, it's ridiculous. Why do we need another study to show that it disrupts sperm count? And then I see people on the street, they have their cell phone right there. And then the same day, I read a freaking article and it's, oh my God, sperm rates are dropping in men. And I'm like, well, guys, maybe we should do something about just this one part, because of course diet matters. If you're a smoker, if you're under stress, who knows what else that we haven't discovered yet, but we know this thing. We know as a society, I still don't get it, why it's not like, hey guys, maybe we should have warning labels or just a simple tweak for Apple where it detects the presence of your body and automatically turns off the EMFs when it's near your body. That's it. It can be automatic. It actually needs to be automatic, because no one will care as much as we do. We both do. And people will be autopilot. There's so many things they already stress about in their life. So let's just, like, the user shouldn't have the responsibility to protect themselves, to protect their fertility when they purchase an iPhone, right? I don't purchase like something that will disrupt my fertility. I purchase a supercomputer, and I purchase convenience and connection and fun and look at the Apple ads. I'm like, super cool. I don't purchase these side effects. Why are we putting that onto people? That's really my argument in the whole book. And the fertility side of things is freaking scary. And then you mentioned, I mean, anxiety and in teens and stuff like that. There are 75%, according to surveys, of teens that keep their cell phone under their pillow at night. And then at the same time, you have surveys showing that 50% of teens have insomnia or like chronic sleep problems. Well, it's kind of, there's starting to be a kind of causation here, where if you remove the cell phones, maybe it's going to get better, and maybe it's the screen itself. It's all the perfect storm, right? But we've got a problem. We've got a problem in anxiety rising in teens, and this is not even part of my research where I really feel comfortable dropping statistics left and right because I don't know. But when I read the little bit I know about that, Victoria Dunkley, Resets Your Child's Brain, and a couple of books that I need to get my hands on, it's not going well for our teens. I don't know what it is to be a teen anymore. I just turned 30. But it's not the same. The rates, it's even like suicidal thoughts, depression,
yeah,
ADHD.
it's up by like 32% teen suicide.
It's incredible. It's
just in the
worst sense.
Yeah, like 5 years. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. So there is something wrong. There is something wrong with what we're doing what everyone is doing on a constant basis. Is it the food? Is it glyphosate? Is it other things? Possibly. But what has changed the most in the last 15 years is EMFs, cell phone exposure, especially now Wi-Fi in cafes, Wi-Fi in the streets, hotspot, Wi-Fi in the car, Wi-Fi at home. So then it's just exposure over time that we're seeing everyone's health declining so fast. And then I mean, I just put I don't even need science here. I tell someone, go in the middle of the forest, go without any signals. Do you sleep better? Almost 0% will tell me, no, I haven't noticed a difference. Most people are like, wow, this is actually the first night of sleep I've had in 30 years. It's transformational. So there's something different in a natural environment. Well, these signals that we're using to communicate with this very cell phone, they're microwave radiation that has never been seen in nature. That's something not a lot of people understand. There are certain EMFs in nature. We've mentioned UV and the natural Earth's magnetic field, but microwave radiation is now in the average city a quadrillion times higher than back in Mother Nature. Your biology doesn't know what the heck is going on. Just
right.
doesn't know. So,
yeah.
And anyway, I'm digressing, but it's just
yeah.
I had a point
So two quick points, Nick, to add to what you said about fertility. I have this might be TMI, too much information for some people, but me personally, several years ago, I was trying to conceive a child. We were unsuccessful. We did in vitro. So I had my sperm tested. I used to think the cell phone carriers on your belt were dorky. I always carried my cell phone in my front pocket. I had my sperm tested. I had a low count and I had poor motility. So my sperm basically swam in circles. They never made it to the egg. Once I started learning all these things, I was like, holy shit. I stopped carrying my cell phone in my pocket. And, I got divorced. I met somebody else. I now have a child that wasn't planned. So I didn't get my sperm tested again, but obviously they're working better than they were.
Yeah.
The other thing, if you have a low sperm count, you also have a lowered testosterone. The two are intimately tied. So, some guys kind of joke, when I share this with them, that when you keep your cell phone in your front pocket, you're destroying your swimmers. And they're just like, well, I have kids and I don't want to have more kids.
Yeah.
Well, you're also destroying your testosterone, which I don't care who you are. You need testosterone to be motivated, to be healthy. It's actually anti-aging. There are so many benefits to testosterone. So if you're past having kids, if you don't care about having kids, do it for your testosterone. So
yeah, that's
I just wanted to make those points. So I think we've done a good job establishing the fact that we live in a giant cesspool of EMFs, and we've talked about some of the things that some of the symptoms. Kids are having higher anxiety, depression. It's causing infertility. There is a symptom called EHS, which is electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which you talk about in your book quite a bit, Nick. Do you want to just spend a couple minutes giving the high-level points of EHS, what it is, and maybe some telltale signs that one of our viewers might have EHS and not be aware of it.
Sure. With EHS, first, I don't like the term a lot because it kind of makes it sound that people who don't have this condition are immune to EMFs, but it stands for electrohypersensitivity. So they've realized in research, in trying to categorize people that come to a doctor and say, hey doc, I think I'm allergic to Wi-Fi. So it's self-reported, like, I think this is affecting me. A lot of people that have the worst symptoms can literally, some of them, their nervous system becomes numb when they have a cell phone in the hand. They can barely walk. Like I'm talking about, you wouldn't believe, like some people get rashes. Like I've seen completely crazy symptoms. And Scott talks about microwave illness. It's totally true. Back in, well, probably, I've seen documents from the 50s, from the 70s, where they reported the effects on military men who worked near radar station that essentially use microwave radiation too, the same thing. But these guys were working near the radar at very high levels of exposure for a couple of years, and they looked at the symptoms these people were experiencing. It was infertility, but then also it could get into very serious symptoms of the nervous system, like MS, for example. Danny Skolin talks about MS symptoms. Totally, you have people who think they've been convinced or they've been diagnosed with MS. They get in the middle of a forest, and where's the MS? It's gone. Like I've heard about things like that. I've heard about people that think they have Alzheimer's. They get in the middle in the forest, zero signals, they're fine. So they're so sensitive that the symptoms are completely destroying their health or some aspects of their health. Scott Compton there, who's himself used to be very, very symptomatic, as he shared on a podcast we did together. He gets, if I remember correctly, blurred vision and tinnitus, but certain people can have such acute symptoms that you cannot deny that it's happening. You enter a cafe, there's Wi-Fi, some people couldn't stand in the room. So this is EHS in the most important retinal bleeding that Scott talks about. Like it's actually verifiable when you start having red eyes, right? It's kind of crazy. But when you look at the research in the medical literature, you literally have anywhere from 3 to maybe 10% of people that might have debilitating kind of symptoms. So what I'm wondering is how many people think they have Lyme, or they have autoimmunity, or chronic fatigue, Alzheimer's, dementia, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and they're just hypersensitive. And over time, they stay in the environment, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And everyone will tell them, well, there's no way it's the Wi-Fi, right? It's just crazy thoughts. If you want to test it out for yourself, how do you feel when you're in a non-EMF environment? So go camping, go by the beach, just a little shack with barely any electricity. And how do you feel? If you see certain aspects of your health completely coming back, like your digestion all of a sudden getting fixed and crazy things happening, well, you got to think about the fact that the environment is making you sick and not your body is broken somehow. So that's EHS for you. But then researchers like Magda Havas, she's a doctor from the Trent University in Toronto, she looked at EHS, but symptoms that are mild to moderate. So occasional headaches, overly fatigued for no reason, insomnia, depression. We talked about all those. And she thinks personally, and after an entire life of studying the subject and teaching in school and university about it, that 33% of the population, at least 33% of the population suffers from these mild to moderate symptoms.
Wow.
Personally,
I've
that's
never heard
huge.
That before. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
It's unbelievable, especially considering that we're going from 4G to 5G in major cities soon. So, Nick, I want to make a quick point, and I want to bring up an observation that Scott Compton shared with you when you guys did your podcast together. I've never watched the show, but he brought up the show Survivor, and I have seen one episode. But he brought up the point that people went on the show Survivor, which is on kind of like a remote island. People have to fend for themselves. Is that how it works? There's two teams
Well,
or something?
yeah, exactly. It was, well, I didn't watch the show, but it was very
Okay.
popular. They were in the middle of the freaking jungle.
It's something along those lines. So people were basically removed from EMFs. People were losing weight. They were feeling better. They were sleeping better. But very interesting observation. So if you watch the show, just kind of think back. Scott's watched it for 7 years. But if you watch the show, kind of think back and see if you can identify what Scott is talking about and what Nick is alluding to as well, the importance of getting away from the city, getting out in nature, and becoming aware of how you feel and, what you notice that's different. And go camping. Do you sleep better when you camp than in your home? That's a very strong indication that you have some level of EHS. So back to you, Nick.
Sure. Well, some level of EHS or something else in the environment. It's a perfect storm, right? So you have chemicals. So EMFs won't only just affect you because of the EMFs. It will be a perfect storm. For example, some rat studies have shown that when you combine, I think it was gamma rays, so ionizing radiation plus chemicals, you have the perfect storm. Somehow the chemicals become way more toxic when you add some sort of EMF. So the same can possibly be seen in a high Wi-Fi environment. And then you have all the other aspect that is barely researched right now, but that I'm looking to pick Dr. Klinghardt's brain about that, because he's one authority that has spoken so much about the dangers of EMFs on the microbiome. In a recent interview, he shared that, according to him, it's the #1 reason people have disrupted guts. Maybe right next to glyphosate, who knows, but it is a serious reason. And the reason is that people are using this object right next to their gut, literally. So the highest level of EMFs are emitted right next to the device, and you're essentially blasting this gut microbiome. And what it's doing, first, there are a couple studies that have looked at reduced growth rate of beneficial bacteria. So maybe your gut flora that's always evolving, always reproducing these bacteria, it kind of slows down the good guys. And then the bad guys, where a lot of studies have looked at just Wi-Fi in I think it was in a hospital environment, and they concluded that the more Wi-Fi you have, it actually creates antibiotic resistant bacteria. So it encourages certain strain of bacteria to become stronger somehow, as if they feel threatened, and then they adapt and they become stronger, and antibiotics don't work as well. So
it also encourages rapid growth as well.
For them, for sure.
Yeah, and so they become stronger and you have more of them.
Exactly. So these symptoms, it can also be a symptom of EHS, people that just cannot fix their gut. And I find it, I'm very concerned, and I don't want to, like, people don't know, even in the community, even health professionals, like, that's why I want to develop a training for health professionals, because I realize that even people in the paleosphere, holistic medicine, functional, whatever, no one seems to, not no one, but barely anyone seems to know exactly what to do about it, what to tell their clients, their patients. And I just picture people who tell their clients, okay, eat fermented foods, take expensive probiotics, and this and that, and glutamine, and colostrum, and it's all good. But then what does the person do 8 hours per day? Having a cell phone right next to the belly button on 4G.
Or a laptop on their lap.
Same thing. So I'm like, okay, I cannot quantify how much it is disrupting, but it's definitely not helping. And chances are it is very, very hard for these bacteria to understand what the hell you're trying to do. You're just blasting them, and they're trying to communicate between themselves with electricity. And now you're entering foreign signals in there. So I think it's counterproductive, and that every health professional needs to know that for themselves, and then tell their patients, when we see someone who has, let's say, chronic fatigue, Most practitioners nowadays, thankfully, they will say, okay, well, did something happen in the environment? Oh, it might be you have lead paint at home and you have toxicity. Like, they know this is a factor. It is a factor to consider. That's very important. And then one other thing is mold toxins. And we know that a lot of houses in the US, because of the floods and the hurricanes and everything, New Orleans, and then, well, lately it was Miami and Florida and other parts that were completely flooded. When you get a flood at your home in the basement, you have mold toxins that can develop and it gets into the air. Well, when you add Wi-Fi on top of that, research by Klinghardt has shown that mold toxins will start spewing something like 650 times the toxins when they're exposed to Wi-Fi. Again, because they probably feel threatened. And this is, I was talking with none other than Dave Bulletproof Asprey 2 weeks ago, and Dave told me he's big into mold toxins and removing it from his products, right? The way you create vitamin C is actually by stimulating the growth of vitamin C, and then it's a fermentation process, essentially.
Oh, for like ascorbic acid?
Yes, ascorbic acid. So basically, you piss off, the way you put it, you piss off the mold by adding none other than microwave radiation and magnetic fields in the mix. This is how you create that. And I've seen patents around that. I'm like, oh shit. It's kind of crazy, right? So
unbelievable.
It is. So we already know that it can do good. That's the thing. We recognize in science that it can do good, these EMFs. There are many applications for medical situations. Even X-rays have their place and MRIs and stuff like that. They can be life-changing. It's amazing that we have this technology. But right now, we are using this microwave radiation and thinking and believing that it doesn't do anything. It's not the case. It's not only not the case, I think in the future, if I had conversations also, I had the privilege to connect with Dr. Mercola as well, and he has a different, he can afford to be a little bit more alarmist, I think, because he has the credibility to back it up. But he's like, no, Nick, you don't understand. I think, like, he thinks that microwave radiation might be more dangerous than X-rays. That's the way he puts it. And his book is going to come next year. Maybe it's going to change my discourse as well if the data is more there. But if this is true, this is even worse than I thought.
Right.
Like, this is such a big problem.
Very alarming. Very alarming.
Yeah.
And something that you brought to my attention, Nick, in your book is the fact that EMFs, from your phone, from your laptop, can cause leaky gut. And I was aware of a lot of the other things. I never knew that about the gut. It makes perfect sense, but we've got an explosion of autoimmune diseases in this country. Everybody with an autoimmune disease has a leaky gut. It causes all sorts of other things as well. So it's very alarming. I don't want to scare everyone that's on this call. I do a little bit. I want to find the right balance, though, because I want to make the point that by overstressing on this stuff, you can do just as much harm. So by like freaking out, if you're like just in a store and somebody walks by you and they pick up their cell phone and you kind of freak out, you're creating a stress response in your body, which causes inflammation, which impacts your mitochondrial function. So we want to be smart about it. We want to do our best to mitigate what we can to reduce our exposure. But at the same time, we don't want to just be kind of like constantly freaking out about everything. So I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. I spend a lot of time kind of thinking about the proper messaging to get this point across, to get this through to people, while not kind of like scaring them off. Like, that's why I love the title of your book, non-tin foil. And a lot of us might come across as like conspiracy theorists. So I want to be, very careful not to kind of sound like a raving lunatic, but at the same time, support it with documentation, and support it with Nick's book with over, 600 sites. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit, Nick. Let's talk about some mitigation strategies that we can all do. So
Sure.
I mentioned 3 in the beginning, you know, unplugging your printer because it's always transmitting wireless radiation. Do you go back to wired in your home? So for example,
Yeah, that's good.
you know, my laptop is wired. I've got this little wireless modem. So I do have an iPad, and the only way you can like browse on your iPad is you need a Wi-Fi connection. So I got this little tiny Wi-Fi router. It's like $20. So when I need to use my iPad, I just plug this little guy in, and it's portable. You can bring it anywhere. So that's what I do. I've got a very long LAN cable that I run from my my router, which is in my office, out to my entertainment center, you know, to plug in so I can watch my Amazon Prime, so I can watch Netflix without having to do it wirelessly. This is a little hardcore. It's not for everyone. At night, I turn off the circuit breaker in my house to reduce the electric fields around my house. If you're not ready to get rid of your Wi-Fi full time, a very simple hack is you can buy a timer that you plug it into, and you can automatically have the power turn off when you go to sleep and then turn back on in the morning. So those are just a couple quick hacks that I wanted to share. Nick, what else can we do?
Sure, it's the way you use your cell phone might be the number one of these all, because I think it's the most dangerous one, or let's say your biggest exposure. So instead of holding your phone right here, if you create distance and you're like over there somewhere in the corner or like 1 foot distance, you will reduce essentially 80% of the problem. So it's still, it's awesome actually. And you use something like these so to create distance and to still be able to talk because you have an integrated mic. So there you go. And actually it's even more comfortable. People tell me, well, I don't feel good. It kind of, it's very hot on my ear and whatnot. And then you won't get the effects where people report, I don't know where I'm going while I'm in my car. And there's a reason people get into accidents when they talk at the same time. It's not only the conversation, I think it's also the EMF. So creating distance, you really remove the problem. When you put a phone near your body, so let's say shirt pocket, in your bra, in your pocket, it needs to be on airplane mode. So just make it a habit. At first, my wife and partner, Jen, she had a hard time getting into the habit, and I had the hardest time not to be judgmental because I was writing a book on the topic. I was like, no, you need to do that. you need to, seriously, and it's hard to not freak out yourself if you're very passionate about the topic, but people make change on their own time. So preaching by example, saying, you know, you can hit airplane mode, but it is a little bit cumbersome because you have to think about it. But once it becomes a habit, it's like, okay, airplane mode, pocket, I remove airplane mode in front of me while I'm at the office or something like that, if I need to be on call. If you need to carry it around and keep it open 24/7, I would recommend looking into something like a Defender Shield that is a special case that will block essentially at least 80% of the EMFs while still giving the phone the opportunity to connect to the tower properly. It is an investment. I think it's anywhere from 50 to maybe $70 USD, something like that. But it has been created, this brand, by an EMF engineer who really knows what he's doing, Daniel Debon. So this is a great product that could be a solution if you're always on call, or like my dad, he's a realtor.
Nick, what's that called again? It's called the Defender?
Defender Shield. That's the brand.
Defender Shield. Okay.
They have several products.
Great.
There's products for your computer and whatnot. So this thing that you're doing with your phone, creating distance and making sure it's never near your body while it's emitting these EMFs, same thing with your laptop too. So if you use a laptop on the lap, kind of ironically, it's really the worst place to put it because you're blasting towards your your swimmers there, and responding
or if you're a lady,
hey,
either way, you're impacting your reproductive organs.
Exactly. Well, if you're a woman listening to this and you're like, oh, okay, I'm glad it's not a problem for me. Well, unfortunately, you have one egg supply at birth, and actually we're expecting for April. Actually, Jen is expecting, and
that's right.
Our baby, if she's a girl, because we don't know yet, but will already has her egg supply for life before even being born. So it means that if you're damaging your eggs in some way or another with disruptive signals, it is permanent. So we don't know what it's doing in reality to your future child. And Sam talks about mitochondria in women. Most of it is in the ovaries. So it's even like your hormonal production. Like, we don't know exactly how it's impacting it, but it's so important. So there's a good chance that it's impacting your future children, and we don't know to what extent. So it's kind of hard to grasp, but still, don't do it, and you'll feel better, honestly. And 4 hours of laptop use is 25% disruption in sperm count and motility in one study. So it happens pretty fast, but you can recover pretty fast as a man. Women, it's another story. So what else? Well, you mentioned circuit breaker. Some people think it's extreme. At least it's free, and at least it takes a second to do. So that's what we do in the bedroom. And also a plus is that you'll be forced to use just candlelight and to kind of feel calmer and in your pre-bed routine. I think it's overall a better solution to have a very low dim light environment. That's another discussion, but this is the reason we have these orange glasses, is that we don't want this artificial light while we're recording this and doing this live to be very stimulating. Then after that, we cannot go to sleep. So
and just real
sense.
Quick, Nick, just real quick, just for some of the listeners out there, blue light is another EMF. So it's the one EMF that we can actually, the one harmful EMF that we can see. And blue light from the sun is fine because it's balanced with other colors. Blue light from these devices, from artificial lighting, fluorescent lights, LED lights, it's unbalanced. You're getting a much higher level, and that is another EMF. So that's why Nick and I have our glasses on. Real quick shout out. I saw some people complimented us on our glasses. These are prescription lenses. I got them dyed or whatever you call it, tinted by Matt Maruca of Raw Optics. So that's RAOPTICS. I think it's .co. But if you Google Raw Optics, you can send your prescription lenses to Matt. He will tint them for you. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. These are Swannies actually from James Swanwick has developed them. So at first I was using the large UVACs that look very dorky, but I didn't feel good about myself in public somehow. Like, I couldn't get around to the idea. I was like, no, I look too weird, even for me. And that's usually I don't care at all about that. But these are Swannies, pretty good. But I'll look at these because I have contacts on, and I hate having contacts. My eyes are so dry. So I'll probably try to have a pair that has prescription on there.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
And you want to get into something else in particular? I know you had I got to run in a couple. I'd say another 15 because we started late. But I know you had the questions that people sent in.
Okay.
We could definitely go through these in rapid fire if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do some rapid fire, real quick.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Along with Nick's book, he has some kind of like cheat sheets. So this is just one of them I printed out. But it just has some really simple tips on it. Has, kind of highlights some high sources of EMFs. So let me just bring these up real quick. But your mixer, so your Vitamix. When I use my Vitamix, I turn it on and I step away because it puts out a huge magnetic field. Your dishwasher, your refrigerator. So when you hear the refrigerator click on, there's an engine turning. It's putting out EMFs. So be aware of that. And when you hear your refrigerator running, don't be leaning up against it. When your dishwasher is running, don't be leaning up against it. Distance is your friend. There's something called quarter squaring or quarter scale law. And the further you get, the exposure reduces exponentially.
Yes.
Okay. So we've got some questions. Let's go through them. So Lisa Patterson asked, how can parents do more to mitigate Wi-Fi at schools?
Oh, this one is very hard, and once I'll be a parent, I'll let you know how I'll figure it out. It will probably be a fight, but the first thing
inverse square law. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
The first thing is yeah, homeschool is one thing. There are also Waldorf school or schools that actually care about these things and are like, no, we don't think that technology is a good thing, not only because of the EMFs, but just because they don't think that learning on iPads is so valuable. And then the latest science is actually showing that, and even in the north, in Sweden and northern countries, they're starting to go back to no technology. After having a couple of years of testing, they've realized that children are not learning as fast, and these guys are really into high performance. They're a society that will look at their metrics and say, well, something is not right. So it just shows you that not only is the EMS, but the iPad itself is not that much of a good idea. So if you have a school where there are some iPads, well, I would look at the teachers reunion, talking about it with teachers, with the school directors, and educating them, not necessarily fighting them, because they invested sometimes millions in putting all the iPads in the class. It's just like, you don't want to say, hey, you guys have wasted a bunch of money, and on top of that, you're killing our kids. It's a bit hard to take, right? So you gotta point out, for example, I would send all these parents and teachers and directors to Trust. They have Environmental Health Trust. They have an awesome page about that, about the
really
issue.
Great website, yeah.
It's amazing. They have everything, and then talk about the fact that in certain countries like the island of Cyprus and also Israel and several countries, they have started banning Wi-Fi in different school grades for a good reason, over health effects of EMFs, among other things. So showing them that, it's not just my opinion, there are something serious. And if they don't want to remove the iPads and go wired altogether, which is possible but might be an investment for them, at least making sure the Wi-Fi is always off and then on when needed, which is sometimes you'll realize it's 30 minutes per day, but it's always on. And then the IT guys will be like, oh, well, it's gonna do something to our settings, or I don't think any of it is really true. And it has a real effect on, Jack talks about myelination and the growth of the nervous system and the way your nervous system matures, and it will impact myelination and also all aspects of growth of these kids. And there are very strong studies on EHTRAS that they can point towards. And when you talk about kids and the growth and how well they learn, I think you can get people on board, but it's still early, and it will be a fight, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, great. So great resource, EHS Trust. Educate yourself, get involved with the school board, and educate them on these different things. So and that's a really good point about the brain. I mean, the brain doesn't fully develop until 25. So it's not just these kids in grade school, it's kids in middle school, in high school, and even college that are being impacted by this. So let's keep going here. Any smart meter hacks? More and more municipalities are rolling out smart meters. Smart meters are another source of wireless radiation. What can you do to reduce your risk, Nick?
Get the smart meter out. If you can, call your utility company, and sometimes in certain states they will kind of extort you and ask you to pay a fee not to have the smart meter, which is kind of ironic. Fortunately, there's something called the In Power movement, where Joshua Del Sol and I cannot remember his partner now. I'm losing, I don't remember, but these guys are doing great work about fighting back and refusing to even pay the kind of bill that they're going to send you not to have the smart meter. This is the first step, trying to remove the smart meter. Even if you have to pay for it, that's what I would do, because it's not only the pulsing and the fact that the smart meter might be near your bedroom or even your environment. I had a smart meter in my kitchen in Montreal, because in these old apartments where the utility meter is literally in a kitchen cupboard, I see that everywhere in Montreal. They have replaced all these with wireless smart meters in the middle of the kitchen. You're getting blasted with something. I mean, there were spikes of 15 volts per meter. It is so high. I barely see that with a phone on LTE.
Yeah. So anything, just for reference, anything over 0.5, we really want to avoid, right?
Sure. And during the day, I mean, if possible, 0.2 during the day. But if you're in front of a computer with Wi-Fi, you go over that, way over that. So if you use Wi-Fi, you're not screwed, but you're going over what is considered to be, let's say, less damaging. I wouldn't say healthy. Healthy is probably 0, right? But that's another discussion. But smart meter hacks, if not, you can cover your smart meter with tin foil. This is what I did when it was in my kitchen. Fortunately, we moved out. It was just a sub-rent. I actually didn't get the guts at the time to kind of ask to replace the meter, because then they would have to pay for it for months. And I was just living there for 3 months. So it was kind of a weird situation, but it is important that you try to shield in some way or another. And if you're not sure if your smart meter is a problem for you, well, you can look at this thing. So a Cornet ED88T, it's an investment, but it's less than $200, and you can take readings in your environment to see how much of a problem yours is, because a smart meter can be pulsing every second. It can be pulsing once a day. There are different models, and there's no good resource to look at what exact model you have. All I can tell you is that if there's a digital display on your utility meter, chances are it's smart, almost 100% of the time.
Right.
So,
hey,
yeah.
Real quick point, Nick, about
Sure.
having the, excuse me, the meter. Seeing is believing. This is one of the best investments you can make. When I've talked to people in the past, when I've told them, you know, this is putting out a lot of radiation, they wouldn't believe me. When I bring this over and I showed them the readout, they're like, holy cow. My parents, I've been on them for months and months and months. You know, they've got like this, like a clock right by their bed, power strip, iPhone charging cord. So I brought a different meter over. And, this one does RF. I brought an electric meter over. I showed them the readout. It was flatlined. The next time I went over there, the stuff was gone. So seeing is believing. Get one of these meters. If you have, you know, somebody that's a doubter, you can spend a little bit more money and get one. This has an audible signal. It's the same for everything. They have nicer meters that have different audible signals. So it'll be different for your Wi-Fi versus a baby monitor versus your printer and things like that. And when you hear the noise that these electric signals make, it makes a huge difference, because it makes it more real. You know, people have a hard time imagining things they can't see, smell, or taste or hear. When you can hear that, it makes all the difference.
Definitely, great point. And I think it's pretty much rounds up the smart meter. There are a couple of things that I talk about in the book. There's a smart meter guard, but the number one thing you should attempt is to get it out of the home. There's another reason for it. There's dirty electricity, but we won't get into that. But it's just not something you want on your home. It's not smart at all.
Yeah. Okay. So next, how do we protect ourselves from 5G once that rolls out?
Good question. I'm wondering what Jack has to say about that. We're all screwed or something. I honestly,
thermogenesis.
Well, there's everything that you can do for your health to mitigate the damage that EMFs are doing will help. So making sure that you get the proper dose of the right nature's EMF. So a lot of sun, and then you ground yourself. You do walk barefoot on the grass. You go swim in a lake, you go swim in the sea. It will become even more important that you go in low EMF environments, kind of take breaks from this environment. And then make sure to not have a 5G enabled phone. Make sure that your own devices, you're not participating in that. At least you're controlling what you can, but it will become very hard. And what you can do is, when you hear about people assembling in your city, to say, hey, we don't want these small cells, which 5G, to explain very quickly, is going to be a new technology, way faster and a way stronger signal, but over a short distance. So they create something called the small cell technology. So you have one antenna here, and then a block and another antenna, and one every traffic light pole and whatnot. So it's gonna blanket the environment in an electrosmog that is way thicker than ever before. So you can oppose that. You can say city council and then legislators and again, Trust. I think they are working with a lot of different organizations, but the Environmental Health Trust can, if you just email them and ask them, well, I'm in Cincinnati, Austin, Montreal. Do you know people that are actually fighting against 5G, or is 5G coming? You can get informed and say, well, I don't want a small cell. I don't want an antenna right in front of my home. And the plan is to have one antenna every 3 to 12 homes in residential areas. So just say no to it, I think is going to be very important. And it's going to become critical for people who want to live in a city and stay healthy to do everything they can to live in a low EMF environment. So it's not going to be an option, I think, to have this and to learn your environment and to even shield your rooms and stuff like that. I'm gonna, yeah, so if possible, you could completely move out of the city, but if it's your job, if it's your life, I understand there are ways to shield. I would, hiring a building biologist that knows what they're doing. These guys have meters that are way more advanced than I do. They understand things and they have been trained properly to mitigate these things. They will help you create almost a Wi-Fi dead zone inside your home, even if you're in a city environment. But there's so much you can do inside a city. It's just like these days, me living inside a city is a choice that will take a toll on my health. If it's not EMFs, it's going to be air pollution. There are cars everywhere and traffic. So it's just one of those things that I think people in cities will see their health decline. And to what extent, I cannot tell you. So let's hope for the better, and let's hope that we can, by spreading the information, talking about it. There's my book, there's Trust, there's your work, Nathan, everyone, there's Jack and his community. I mean, there are so many people fighting the good fight that if you spread the information as much as you can, you're going to help kind of slow down at least the rollout as much as possible. And maybe we'll see a time where it's, I don't know, hopefully I'm kind of way too optimistic sometimes, but replaced with something healthier at least, or maybe the signal, they're going to remove the pulsing, they're going to remove certain characteristics and make it a little bit more compatible with human life. Let's be hopeful. Like, I think it can technically be done, but we need to acknowledge a problem in the first place.
Right. Yeah, great recommendations. Get involved, support the Empower movement. They've done a lot of great work. If you're not familiar with them, Scott Compton over at the EMF Warriors did a really great podcast with them. So check that out, but you can make a small donation to them. You can get access to a lot of the movies they've made, and you can see what they're doing. But they're doing some very effective work by using the law to take down some of these people that are pushing these unsafe technologies through for putting profit over people's health. How much more time do you have, Nick?
Maybe 2 minutes, but then I got
2 minutes.
The supper is ready.
Okay, I don't want it to get cold.
Sure.
One last question.
Sure.
When it comes to grounding around power lines,
is
that a smart move, or is that something we want to avoid?
Not smart. And I know Jack would agree on this one. Even grounding inside a home is barely something I'll recommend. You have to be very careful, because when you use a grounding mat and you have electricity around, the grounding mat will conduct some of these electric fields that are in your environment. So what I recommend in the book was that I connected with Dr. Anthony G. Beck, that is a great biohacker that knows a lot, way deeper than my understanding, I think, when it comes to grounding inside. And what he told me, helped me write this part of the book, is that first you turn off the circuit breaker. then you can put an EMF dirty electricity filter and plug your mat in it, like a grounding mat, and also have some sort of resistor between it. I explain it all in the book. It's a little bit more advanced, but do not simply have a mat, put it there, plug it in the wall, because you can actually have your body turn into an antenna and have a very high body voltage. And some people actually report still feeling better. I believe that. But some people, it can backfire big time. So I would never recommend grounding inside if you have electricity on and then cell phones and wireless. I think it's just madness. I think it's just making the problems worse. So what you can do, if you ground, I mean, even near a power line, oh my God, I don't know what kind of electricity we will be exposed to. Just do grounding the way it's intended to be, with your feet on a bare ground. And the sea is probably the #1 place you want to be. Walking by the sea, swimming in the sea, a lake is good. Walking on the wet grass is also amazing. And try to be as close to nature as possible. I don't think grounding mat, I think it has its limitations, and unless you know what you're doing, I would refrain from using them.
Yeah, but just to clarify, but grounding outside in the vicinity of the power lines, Jack mentioned they're one of the worst non-native EMFs. Jack also mentioned that grounding using a mat indoors with 5G is going to be far worse, probably order of magnitudes worse. But grounding, you know, if there's like a power line overhead, do you want to be barefoot, or are you better off insulated from the ground in that case?
Wow, near power lines, the electric fields and magnetic fields are so high that I wouldn't hang out there anyway too much. I mean, you can light up a freaking fluorescent bulb by holding it in the air under certain power lines. You're getting blasted, so I wouldn't ground near a power line. No, I would not do it. I would try to steer away from it and go into freaking nature instead. Power lines should never have been put in residential areas. It was just a political thing. If you read Andrew Marino's book, Going Somewhere, I learned it from Jack Cruz, actually, who recommended the book wholeheartedly. It's amazing. You see all the history of how they were able to kind of show, oh no, EMFs are not a problem, let's put power lines everywhere. And it was a political thing, and just follow the money trail.
Politics over health.
Really as always. So
in that book.
Don't hang out near power lines. Yeah.
Nick, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. It was a lot of fun. Get Nick's book. It's an awesome book. You can buy it on Amazon. Do you sell it from your website, Nick?
Yeah, it's on the website. You can also have a $15 version for the ebook if you want.
Okay.
But
so share your websites real quick.
Sure. If you go to emfbook.com, that's the redirect link I've created, or the non-tinfoil guide to EMFs, just look on amazon.ca, amazon.com, .co.uk, all the Amazons of the planet. Hopefully they're there. It should be there. So just look for the non-tinfoil guide to EMFs. And if you want to learn more about what I do, type my name and EMFs. It's starting to come up, a couple of interviews. I think I've done 25 interviews in the last few months.
Cool.
So there's a lot of stuff that I share there that is completely free. But honestly, the book, I think it's worth the investment, and that you'll learn something. It's very simple, and it's also, well, I don't know if I used enough humor in this interview, but the book is a little bit funny. We talked about very heavy stuff today, but it is also, I try to make it funny a little bit because it becomes a bit more digestible. So, and Jack says he put a tinfoil hat with a 5G smart meter and the foil caught fire. That's awesome.
Wow, bad news. Hey, well, Nick, I'll let you grab your dinner. I want to thank you so much. And let's do this again.
For sure. We'll be happy to do another live later, maybe early next year, and report back on some of my new findings.
Cool. Okay, Nick. Well, thanks so much. Next week, I've got another very special guest, none other than Jack Cruz. So Jack's been dropping some awesome comments on this call tonight. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Jack. Jack just opened a clinic. So Jack has some very forward-thinking ideas about the future of medicine, how he wants to educate other doctors out there so they can do a more effective job. And I want to get his insight on a lot of different things, like where he thinks medicine has to go, in this country, globally, to have more of a positive impact on health outcomes. Because right now, we're doing a pretty shitty job. I mean, the US is ranked 50 out of 55 countries for health outcomes. I don't know what you guys are up in Canada, Nick. Probably not that much better. And
probably not good.
The US spends more than any other country, and we die younger, we get sicker. We're doing some things very, very wrong. So join me next week. Be sure to check out Nick's podcast that he did with Scott Compton of EMF Warriors. Lots of other information that we didn't get a chance to touch on tonight. And thanks everyone for joining. People in America, happy Thanksgiving. People around the world, have an awesome week too. So thanks. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.
See you guys.